Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the undisputed facts of what's easily one of America's most puzzling and enduring missing persons cases. We're talking about the mysterious disappearance of Maura Murray. You know, missing persons cases happen every single day, unfortunately, but what makes this specific story so captivating to investigators and amateur sleuths alike is the incredibly narrow window of time in which the whole thing unfolded. We're going to walk through exactly what we know, step by step, to try and understand how someone can just vanish into the freezing night air.
10. That's the number you really need to keep in mind as we go through this explainer. Just 10 minutes. Think about it. That's roughly the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee, right? Or maybe listen to a couple of your favorite songs. But for 21-year-old Maura Murray, it was literally all the time it took to vanish entirely from a snowy public road. There's no clear trail, no definitive evidence left behind in the snow. It's just a 10-minute gap that has completely baffled authorities for over 2 decades.
Part 1. A Sudden Disappearance, February 9, 2004.
So on that freezing winter evening, Maura Murray, a 21-year-old, really dedicated nursing student at UMass Amherst, got behind the wheel of her black 1996 Saturn sedan. By all accounts, she was just a typical college student. But that day, she drove off campus, headed north into New Hampshire, and eventually ended up on a really dark, isolated stretch of Route 112. And here's the sobering fact that kind of anchors this entire explainer. To this day, no confirmed sighting of her has ever been established since that night. She just drove away from her life and stepped right into a mystery.
Section 2. The Strange Departure. Unusual Preparations.
Now, disappearances rarely just happen in a vacuum, right? The timeline of a missing person usually starts hours or even days before they actually go missing. And what's truly baffling here is how systematically Maura prepared to leave campus earlier that afternoon. This definitely wasn't just some spontaneous drive to clear her head. She actually emailed her professors, saying she'd be out for about a week because of a family emergency. But investigators later found absolutely zero evidence that any such family emergency even existed. Then she packed up all the belongings in her dorm room, she hit up an ATM to withdraw cash, bought some alcohol, and, very tellingly, she made a mysterious call to a local hotel, seemingly looking for a place to stay. Every single one of these actions points to someone making a very deliberate, planned exit.
Which, of course, brings us to the ultimate question about her state of mind. Why the sudden exit? Why lie to her professors? Why pack up her entire room? We do know her dad had spoken with her earlier that evening, and after the crash, he apparently tried to contact her again, but she was already gone. So we're left looking at all these puzzle pieces and wondering, who was she running from? Or maybe running to? And why did she so abruptly and quietly drive away from Massachusetts? Investigators have never firmly established where she was actually heading, making her true plans a complete mystery.
Moving on to Section 3. The 10-minute window. The locked room mystery on Route 112.
Okay, so the conditions out on Route 112 were really poor and snowy that night. And the sequence of events that unfolds at a spot called Weathered Barn Corner is so rapid, it honestly defies basic logic. Check this out. At 7:27 p.m., a local resident spots the Saturn on Route 112. Literally a minute later, at 7:28 p.m., the car crashes into a snowbank. Now, at 7:30 p.m., a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood stops his bus and offers to help. He asks if he should call the police, but Maura explicitly refuses. She tells him she's already called AAA and makes it crystal clear she doesn't want the cops involved. So Atwood leaves her at the car, drives the short distance to his home nearby, and sensing something just isn't right, he calls 911 anyway. By 7:37 p.m., the police arrive on the scene.
But Maura was gone. In the time it took for a bus driver to drive a super short distance home and dial 911, and for a police cruiser to respond to that dispatch, the scene was completely empty. Just around 10 minutes had passed between the crash and the arrival of law enforcement. 10 minutes on a cold, snowy, isolated road. I mean, it is incredibly difficult to just evaporate into the landscape in that time frame without leaving a single trace. And yet, the driver was absolutely nowhere to be found.
Section 4. The Search and Clues. The Abandoned Saturn.
When police arrived at the scene, they immediately noticed this haunting contrast. They were looking at a fresh crash site, sure, but the story the vehicle was telling just didn't match the reality of a driver who simply walked away to get help. Just look at what was left perfectly intact inside the locked vehicle. Her purse, her personal belongings, and, notably, empty beer and wine containers. The airbags had deployed, and the windshield was cracked from the impact. But contrast that locked, secured car filled with her most vital possessions against the complete absence of Maura herself. Think about it. If you're fleeing a crash site to seek safety or find a phone,
Why on earth do you take the time to lock the doors but leave your purse behind? Well, the authorities didn't waste any time. An immediate, massive search was launched. A tracking dog was brought in to follow Maura's scent. The dog successfully picked up a trail from the crash site and tracked it along Route 112. But then, the trail just suddenly ended. It didn't veer off into the deep woods or anything, it just stopped dead on the road. Search teams meticulously checked the nearby woods, the roads, the buildings. Helicopters even scanned the whole surrounding area from above. Yet, despite all this massive coordination, absolutely no physical trace of her was recovered. No body was found, no confirmed clothing was ever recovered. The landscape yielded nothing, literally nothing.
Section 5. Unanswered Questions and Theories, a case that refuses to disappear.
For more than 2 decades, human nature has sort of rushed in to fill this vacuum of facts with theories. With no body, no clothing, and a scent trail that literally went cold in the snow, we have to look objectively at the 4 prevailing possibilities that have been built up over the last 20 years. And we've got to maintain absolute neutrality here, because extensive searches have never produced a single shred of definitive evidence to support any one of these over the others. Theory 1. She voluntarily left the area to start over somewhere else. This kind of leans into all those strange preparations she made before leaving campus. Theory 2. She accepted a ride from a passing driver, which, honestly, would perfectly explain why the dog's scent trail abruptly ended right there on the asphalt of Route 112. Theory 3. Because the road was so isolated, she was the victim of foul play by a stranger who just happened to pass by in that incredibly tight window. And Theory 4. In a state of shock from the crash and the freezing cold, she wandered into the deep woods to hide from the police and tragically died of exposure. All 4 of these are physically possible within that 10-minute window, but none, absolutely none, have ever been proven.
Which leaves us with this final, haunting question. What really happened in those 10 minutes? What you should take away from this explainer today is just how incredibly fragile a timeline can be. We have a packed car, an unverified emergency, a crash, a super brief conversation with a witness, and then just silence. It seems nearly impossible for someone to vanish from a public road without a single trace in a mere 10-minute window. So I leave you with this to chew on. Is there a forgotten piece of evidence, or maybe a witness who never came forward, that will someday surface to explain this snowy New Hampshire mystery? Or is the fate of Maura Murray destined to remain America's most haunting, impenetrable locked room puzzle?